Okay, you have an amazing idea for a cake. You want to make one of those gravity-defying cakes that stands up on its own. But how do you turn a Google image like this into a template that you can actually use to carve your cake, make it the right size, make it look like the picture that you've chosen? And then how do you turn that template into an actual cake that stands up, doesn't collapse, and can then be eaten like this? I'm going to show you how. This is a cake structure for a standing sculpted cake. I made this for my Sulley from Monsters Inc. cake. So I made the video in 2 parts because it was getting quite a long video, and I also thought this would be quite useful if you were looking to make a sculpted cake, maybe that wasn't exactly the same as the one that I made in my video. So this is part 1, you can use this if you like, and then make Sulley from Monsters Inc. or you can use this to make anything you like. Part 2, I'll show you how I did all the cake carving, ganache, sugar paste, the face, the features, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I hope you go and check out part 2 as well. Hope you stick around and see how this is put together. I hope you give it a try. If you do, please let me know in the comments, and please like and subscribe to my channel. So this is how you make your own template. So first of all, obviously decide what you want to make. So I'm going to make Sulley from Monsters Inc. So I've just googled Sulley Monsters Inc. and then clicked on images, and I'm just going to choose the image that I want, and the easiest way to do it is to choose an image that you would be happy to make the cake look like, because then you can use this as your exact template. So I'm going to go for this one. So if I click on it, then it shows me the image on its own, and all I'm going to do is a screenshot. So excuse my voice. So on this laptop I've got a button that literally says print screen. Your laptop may be different. On my Apple laptop, you need to hit like 3 different buttons at the same time to take a screenshot, so you might need to Google that. So now I paste the image onto a Word document, and then I'll double click it and I'll click crop. I'm sorry, my voice is it's just coming back actually, it was totally gone for a couple of days. So crop out everything except your image, and then hit return, and then you can make it a bit bigger. And once you make it bigger, you can crop it as far as you want. So what I'm going to do is, my plan is to make the body from cake, because it's going to be quite a big cake. So it's not all going to be cake. I'm thinking I'll make the body from cake, and then I may just make the arms and head and legs from Rice Krispie treats. So what I've decided is I want the body to be 8-inch round cakes. That's what I've baked. So crop it again. This time what I'm doing is I'm going to crop right into the body. So you don't need to be exact with it, because the way that he's standing he's at an angle, so you won't be able to get it perfect so that the whole body is cropped. But what I've done is I've cropped so that I know that this part is the only part, like it's the crop is touching it, if that makes sense. So I can then hit return, and that crops everything else out, and then when I double click it again, I can put in the size that I want the image to be. So this is your width and this is your height, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this 8 inches wide, and then I know that the body is going to be 8 inches across, which is my cake size. So I literally just type in 8 inches and hit return, and it makes the cake, if only, it makes the picture absolutely massive, so you can't see it all. So what I need to do now is position it and lay it out. I've right clicked the image and the layout is shown here, and I'm just going to choose the option square, and that lets me move it around easier before it sort of confines you to certain things. I don't really understand it, to be honest, but if you choose square you should be able to move it around. So that's what I've got. it's made the image the size that I want it, but it's in such a way that it's only showing me his like top right of his head and a part of his arm. But that's fine, because what you're going to need to do now is, unless you've got a really huge printer where you can actually lay out the whole thing, you'll need to print all the different parts of his body on separate pieces of paper and then stick them together. That's what I do anyway. So I've got one set up already that I've done earlier, Blue Peter style. So this is set up now over 9 images, and all I did with that was I took this image. So I've got one part of his face and arm. Now what I would do to get the other parts is I would click the image, I would copy it, I would paste it onto another page, and then I would double click it again and click crop again. But now I can move the image around inside the crop. So when you hit crop, you can literally just double click it and drag the image around so that it shows different parts of the image that you've got. So what you need to do, the easiest thing is to have your image, your starting point, have that like positioned where you think it needs to be. So this is the sort of middle part of what you just seen a minute ago. So I know that the next part needs to be this part of his head and a part of his left arm. Oh sorry, it's inverted, so this would be his left arm and this would be his right arm. So what I would do then is take the image that I just copied and pasted, and I just want to line them up. So double click and crop again, and now I'm going to drag the image around until it matches up with the image that I've got sitting next to it. Do you see that? And when you're happy with it, you can just hit return. So honestly, it'll be quite difficult to make it perfect, but that, like, I'm quite happy with that. Obviously you've got this gap in the middle, but that won't be there when you print. So what I would do is I would print borderless. So what I usually do is when I print, I'll go to layout and I will go to margins, and then you can click custom margins and you can set all of these to 0, so you can literally just delete what's there and write 0, and once you've done that you can just click OK and it will give you 0 margins on this page, or as close to 0 as it can be. So I've got that already because I've done that so many times. It comes up saying last custom setting, so once you've done that it'll give you that last custom setting option. And then when you do print, you want to click file, go to print, and then go to printer properties and click borderless printing, and it just saves you a bit of hassle, because all that border is doing is taking up room on your page where your image is, and you just need to cut that off, so it's just a bit of a pain. So you want to print borderless, and like I say, you just want to click your image that you had already sized in the beginning, copy it, paste it, and then find the part that lines up again with the image that you've got already. So now I've got his right arm, both sides of his face except the bottom, and his left arm. So if I've done this again, I've clicked crop, and then I would, the thing as well when you're dragging this is if you put the cursor onto the next page, it will let go. So you can drag it across, but when the cursor gets to the edge of the page, you want to let go and go back to the side again, if that makes sense. So I'm just dragging it across, and as you can see as well, you can see the shadow of the image. See it on the other pages? It's like you can see that shadow of the whole image, which is really helpful, because if you see that shadow here, look, you can see it's not lining up. It's that you shouldn't be able to see that shadow if you've lined it up right. So that looks pretty good. The shadow's lined up with the image, and I've got the next part of his body, which is this big hand. And I would just keep doing that until I've got the whole thing, which is this. It's going to be a big guy, but I mean, we know Sulley's a big guy, so that's what we do. And then I will literally just hit print on that, like I showed you, borderless printing and everything. And then I'll have 9 pages of this. Everything will line up and it'll be absolutely fine. It's just what I would do now is line it up. It's like a jigsaw. Put some tape behind each piece of paper where they meet. No point putting tape down at this part because you're going to cut that off. And then once you've got your template all stuck together, you can cut out the image and use that as your template to carve your cake. So hopefully that made sense and was easy enough, but feel free to ask me any questions in the comments if you're struggling. But yeah, so I'm going to go and cut out this huge template of Sulley and get caking. Okay, so this is my template and it is just the print that I showed you how to make earlier on the computer, and I've just stuck them all together. With the template being the exact size that I want the cake to be, I can then use this template for pretty much everything throughout the process of making the cake, including deciding on the positioning of the cake. So I can hold it up and decide exactly where it's going to sit, where the rods are going to go, all that sort of stuff. I'm going to mount the rods onto 12mm thick plywood board, and I will cover this board as well so that it looks a bit more presentable and, more importantly, is food safe. I will need to put some little feet under the board to hold it up so that when I put this rod through, it doesn't mark the work surface or make the board unstable. And what I'm showing you here is that I'm going to put a rod on each side which will go through the legs of my template, and that's going to hold the cake up and give it the legs that we need. So what I'm going to do first is decide exactly where the rods are going to go for the best support, but also so that they'll be hidden the best within the cake. So what I'm going to do is put the rods inside the legs, sort of where the back of the heel would be, like close to the inside of each leg. That's going to run up the middle of each leg and it should be on the outside of the body. And this line that I'm drawing horizontally here is going to be a cake card, and that will support my cake. I'm going to mix up some Rice Krispie treats also, and I'll stick some of them to the underside of the card so that it just doesn't cut off in a really sharp flat way, and that will round things out underneath. And we'll also use some Rice Krispie treats in the legs and arms and head as well. I'm deciding on how tall I want the rods to be here as well, so I'm just going to draw a straight line all the way up my template where I want the rod to stop, and then I'm going to measure that. So the one on the left hand side that I'm drawing at the moment, I've decided that I want that to go all the way up to the top and poke through the top of the cake because I want to slide the Rice Krispie treat head on top of that, and then that's going to have its support from that as well. And then the one on the right hand side will be just slightly shorter so that it stays within the body and hidden. What I will then do, once the rod's all set up and I've layered the cake up to where I want it to stop, is I will wind some armature wire around that left hand rod, and I will secure that, and that's going to be where his arms are going to go, because it's quite a big cake, so they're not going to stand up in that position that I've chosen, this really awkward and difficult position that I've chosen for myself. They're not going to stay like that by themselves, so the armature wire is going to hold them up in that position. So the piece of board that I'm using is 17.5 inches across by 12 deep. So I'm starting out just by finding the centre of the board, and then I'm going to work out from there just to make sure that the cake is sitting sort of in the middle from the front to back, if that makes sense, just so that it's a bit more stable. And then I'm just going to align my template to where I want the rods to be, where I've marked out, and I'm just going to extend the line down from where I've marked it on the paper onto the board. And just like that, I've got my 2 marks where the rods are going to be fitted, and I will drill those holes with a 6mm drill bit. I'm using 6mm threaded rod for this. You could go a little bit thicker and it might be a little bit more stable, but this was absolutely fine. There was no issues in transit. But yeah, I'm using 6mm because it's easier to cut through by hand with a hacksaw. And because it's 6mm rod, we then need 6mm nuts and washers. So I've got 6mm normal size washers, which is what you can see at the moment. And I've also got 6mm repair washers, which are they have a much bigger outside diameter. This is what I'm holding at the moment. So the hole in the centre is 6mm, so it threads onto the washer exactly the same as the other ones, but it's a much larger piece, and this is really good for supporting things that are going to sit on top of it, because it's taking up more of the surface area. So hopefully that explains what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But if anyone has any questions at all about the setup of the washers, why we do what we do, please feel free to ask in the comments. I'm actually an engineer by trade. I still work as an engineer as well as making cakes, so I can speak to this a little bit if anyone is curious. So I'll just apologise now if anyone is wondering why what you're seeing doesn't always fully make sense to what I'm saying right now. That is because I recorded explaining what I was doing as I was doing it, but as with everything, I get carried away. I take far too long to explain things, and the video would be about 3 hours long, so I've had to cut it down and just record over it. So 6mm holes drilled where I've marked them, and now I'm just going to use this white glossy contact paper to cover the board fully. It looks really nice and it makes it food safe. I'm using a tall scraper here just to smooth over it to make sure there's no air bubbles, and then I'm just going to fold the contact paper underneath where you won't see it, and then I will pop through where I've drilled those holes, and everything should look really neat and tidy, and like I say, it will be food safe. I just bought this contact paper from Amazon, but you should probably be able to get it from most craft stores as well. This little box is absolutely amazing for cakes that need an internal rod. It is full of little furniture pads and little rubber feet. I just got it from Aldi actually, but I'm sure you can buy these elsewhere. You can definitely buy furniture pads and stuff like that on Amazon. So I've chosen for these little square rubber feet. These are my favourite because they're the deepest, they're square, and they're self-adhesive, so you just peel off the plastic on the back and stick it to the board. I was going back and forth when I was putting the rods in, trying to see if I'd get away with just using one, but in the end I had to double them up for the height, just so that I made sure that I had enough clearance underneath for the rods and that the rod could come through enough that it would be stable. So you can see one here, but I did add another one on top of that. So that's something you do need to always be mindful of when you're adding your little feet under the board, is you need to make sure that the feet are tall enough that the rod is not going to touch the work surface underneath, but you also need to make sure that you've got your nut tightened so that the rod is coming through at least one thread through the nut, otherwise it's not fully secure and it could come loose. I did also put a little furniture pad in the centre there because the cake is quite heavy and I don't want the board to dip in the middle. So I'm now ready for the threaded rod, and the next phase is to just measure how long that needs to be and cut it, which to be honest is my least favourite part. Absolutely hate cutting threaded rod with a hacksaw. You need a lot of elbow grease in there. So as I said earlier, if you've made your template properly, it should be the exact size that your cake will be. So you literally just need to measure how far up you've drawn that line, and I've got 17 inches on this one, and that's going to bring it to where I want the rod to stop. And on the other side I've made it 14 inches tall. Okay, so I now have my rods, one 17 inch and one 14 inch, and I just need to pray to the gods now that that is actually going to work and go to plan. So, interrupting for one moment, I just want to let you guys know that for this structure, if you wanted to adapt it to another sort of standing cake that was not Sulley and you didn't need this taller rod for the head, say you wanted to make SpongeBob for example, then you would just make both rods the same length and you would just have them cut off about an inch or two from the top of your cake. So this is the structure. I'm going to slide on the repair washer from the bottom up because it's not travelling so high up the rod. A nut will go underneath that repair washer to hold it where I want it to sit. Then I will put in another nut, a washer. I'll slide the rod on the board and then there'll be another washer and a nut underneath, and everything will be tightened and kept in the place that I need it. And it's important to check clearance to make sure that the feet are holding the board high enough that the nut is not going to touch on the work surface. So I'm just zooming through the other one, just the exact same process, and then I will show you underneath so that you can see that there's good clearance. And then you're just going to need 2 spanners or grips, anything that you can use to tighten these nuts. You put one on one side, one on the other, and just tighten them until they're really secure and you know it's going to support your cake. So now I've measured between the 2 rods. I'm going to mark exactly where the rods need to sit on the cake card, and then I'll poke that through with a craft knife and place it down on the rods. And then use my template to decide where the cake card should sit. The nuts will then be adjusted up to be exactly under where I want that cake card to stay, and then I'll put another washer on top of the cake card and another nut, and I'll tighten them both together, and that cake card is not going anywhere. Next up, we're food safing. None of this metal work can touch the cake, so I've got some big straw dowels which I'll place over the rods. I'm going to cut them to size, and then I have some aluminium self-adhesive tape. I bought this from Amazon and I absolutely love it. It's so handy for food safing things because it is literally like tin foil that sticks to things, and it comes in a roll of tape. And that is pretty much it. The structure has been made and we are ready to start adding cake to this. If you would like to see how I made Sulley from Monsters Inc. using this cake structure, then go to part 2 on my channel and you can see that. You can also use this structure or modify it slightly to make other kinds of cakes and other characters. For example, I made SpongeBob a couple of times, I've made Bluey. You could pretty much make any standing cake with 2 legs with this structure. Yeah, as I said earlier, I would probably just make the rods the same length and just have them stop about an inch or so below where you want the cake to stop so you don't see them, and it will support the cake and it will look really cool. Thanks everyone. There are lots of cakes like this on my channel, so please like, comment and subscribe and check everything out on there. There's plenty of content and so much to learn and enjoy. Thanks!